Hello, welcome to our webinar on Brazil's public procurement law and the integrity program. My name is Julia Mota, and I am the founding partner of Mota Advogados. Mota Advogados is a law firm specialized in corporate business law and public law. We have been helping foreign companies and Brazilian companies to do business in Brazil and to do business with the public sector for the last 15 years, over 15 years. And we're going to start a series of webinars based on the new procurement law that was issued last year in April, on April 1st, 2021. The new procurement law, public procurement law, was issued in Brazil that replaced the former law 8666. So there is the new law provides for a series of changes in the procedures that will be used by public agencies, public entities, and direct government for procurement of goods and services in Brazil. So the idea is, considering the law is a little bit complex and the law has many articles, and we're going to be focusing on specific issues. Today, our main goal is to talk about the anti-corruption program and the integrity program, the way the law has treated this aspect of the public procurement. So welcome to our webinar today. We're going to start sharing the screen. Oh, let me introduce myself. Sorry. My name is Julia Mota, and I am specialized in corporate law. I have founded a Mota Advogados law firm 17 years ago, and the main focus of our firm is to help companies with any legal issues related to corporate, public procurement, and corporate law in general. So I think we can start now. It's 6:03. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So Brazil is signatory to the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption. And in 2013, we have seen a new law to fight against corruption in Brazil called the anti-corruption law. And this law has changed the way corruption was seen in Brazil, mainly from individual from the individual level, but since the promulgation of law 12,846, we also have administrative and liability of the legal entities. So the legal entities can also be liable for corruption, not only individuals, as it used to be before the promulgation of this law. And you may know that we had a very huge corruption scheme in Brazil that was investigated, and many people went to jail, and this has been a turning point in Brazil. Starting from 2014, we had the car wash and Lava Jato operation. And so several companies were involved in this operation. And we saw that the concern about liabilities related to corruption has been growing since then. We had a new law, the state companies law, that was promulgated in 2016. This law provides for the procurement procedures for all state-owned companies. So Petrobras, the Brazilian bank, Banco do Brasil, and all of we have in Brazil, we have more than 140 state-owned companies. And some of them are really huge, and they have a huge amount of procurement. So they are now subject to Law 13303 and the rules related to procurement and anti-corruption systems. The new public procurement law has brought some new concepts related to integrity. For instance, for contracts exceeding 200,000 million reais, the integrity program is mandatory. You may want to ask, what is an integrity program? So we're gonna talk about the integrity program and what does it mean, but basically an integrity program are procedures and rules concerning the prevention of corruption, prevention of illicit acts by a company and its collaborators. So the new law provides that for huge contracts, the company must have an integrity program in place. The company has 6 months after contract signature to establish an integrity program. Another interesting aspect is that having an integrity program is a tie-breaking criteria in the judgment of the proposal. So if you have the same price of your competitor, but you do have an integrity program in place in your company, you win the bid. Also, having integrity programs in your company can reduce the sanctions by administration, and can also be an important element for you to requalify and to rehabilitation of your company before the public administration. So the whole idea of the of law 14133 is that it encourages the companies to establish integrity programs based on the fact that in any case, it will be necessary for your company to show to the public administration that you have a concern about corruption. And we know that it's a culture issue, and what we have been seeing in Brazil in the last 20 years, and mainly in the last 10 years, we have been very focused on developing our public administration and making it more digital, making it more fast and agile and efficient. And fighting corruption is part of this this huge movement that we are going through in Brazil in the last 10 years. So what is an integrity program? You may have heard about compliance. Compliance is, we could say that most people working in the corporate, in a company and in the market have heard about compliance. So basically, compliance is to assessing the risks that your company has and making sure that you mitigate the risks of your company in all areas. So you have compliance for environmental area, depending on your business. You have compliance for labor, you have compliance for tax, and you have compliance for all of the areas that the company is involved. So you have to consider what is your company activity, where do you work. For instance, if you work only in a country, or if you do business in several areas in the world, or if you have several markets, or if you deal with public entities or not. So making a diagnosis of your risks is one of the most important things for compliance. And here today, we are going to talk about compliance for anti-corruption only. So that's the only point we're going to talk today. But this must be part of the whole compliance program of the company. So anti-corruption must be a compliance measure that is aligned with all other areas of the company. Okay, so what is an integrity program? When you talk about integrity, you think about ethics. You think about ethics. You think about what is wrong and what is right. So if you ask someone, is it wrong to give a gift to this public agent and costing, I don't know, $100? No, yes, depends. Or is it wrong to give? I just want to give a gift to this public agent that costs $500,000. Is it wrong? Is it right? So what happens is sometimes ethics is a pretty much general concept. What is wrong to one person is not wrong for another person. So the goal of an integrity program is to make the general concept of ethics very objective. So having rules and having codes and having very simply, in a very simple way, in a very concise and simple way, given to the company members what is wrong and what is right. And if you don't know how to proceed, so if you don't know, if you work in a company and all of a sudden you have a doubt if something is wrong or right, how should I proceed? So all these rules must be part of an integrity program. Policies and instruments for prevention, detection, and remediation of harmful acts to the public administration. So what happens is, if you want to do business, for instance, in Brazil, with some of the Brazilian states provides that it is mandatory to have an integrity program in your company if you want to provide services to a certain state of Brazil. So the integrity program can be summarized in 5 pillars. The first one is the commitment and support from top management. This is the tone of the top. So if the directors and managers, the CEO is committed, it changes everything. It is impossible to implement an integrity program in a company if the board, if the chairman, if all of the members of the board are not completely, fully involved. They have to make declarations, they have to talk about this program, they have to enforce, they have to provide resources for this program. And this is very important. Authority in charge, you gotta have one person, one department in charge of this integrity compliance program, profile and risk analysis, structuring of roles and instruments, and continuous monitoring strategies. Let's go one by one. So first one, I have started by talking about the top management commitment. Tone at the top. The culture of the company must change. If you don't have corruption in your country, And we know there are some countries in the world that has very few corruption. So it's maybe not necessary, but considering the history of certain cultures, certain countries, we have to change the culture. It's very complicated. So the change of the culture must come from the top management. The top management must show the examples, must show their behavior, must show that really concerned about these programs. They must participate to the training. They must go and participate to the trainings. So they must adopt measures that are related to the program, such as providing resources, financial means for the department to make sure that the program is implemented, and if the program is audited. It's very important also that the compliance department must be independent. Why? Because the compliance department must not be subordinated to another area. It must be independent and coordinate with other areas. The Department of Compliance of Integrity must coordinate with their human resources area, with the auditing area, with the financial area, to make sure that, for instance, you have all sorts of controls that are coordinated between these areas. For instance, if the compliance officer wants to do a training, it must be in cooperation with the human resources department of the company. And the trainings are very important, very important. So this department must be following up and make sure that irregularities are investigated. Because if you have an integrity program in place, and if there's a problem, if there's a harmful act by someone, you have to make this department is responsible for making sure that it is investigated. The investigation goes until the end, and the penalties are, the discipline measures are applied. And this department must report directly to the highest hierarchical level of the company. It's very important. For instance, we know that in some cases, we have board of directors involved in corruption schemes. So this person must be protected, or this person or this department must be protected to avoid retaliations. And of course, if you tell me, Julia, but my company has 5 people, and I am the president, and I have 1 director, and I have 2 managers. So how can I manage to have a compliance department? So ideally, the compliance manager is independent. But if you have a very small company, you can have 1 person using 2 hats. You can have, for instance, the head of legal doing compliance. It's not the best thing that you have legal doing compliance, that you have human resources doing compliance. But if it's a small company, we always have to consider risks versus investment. So the highest are your risks concerning corruption. The highest is your risk concerning corruption. The highest must be your investment. If you have very few risk, for instance, your company doesn't make business with public sector. So you have a very limited risk of corruption. Your company your company has only very few employees. So your risk is also reduced. Your company doesn't hire third parties. So your risk is reduced. So we're going to talk about risk management and how to make this, to make it proportional. So the investment in compliance must be proportional to your risk. If you have a huge company operating in several countries, doing business with several governments and several public companies, you're going to have a huge investment in compliance also. So there's a proportion involved. The third point of an integrity program, like I was mentioning, is the risk analysis. So the first thing to do is to get to know yourself. So if you tell me, well, my company is very small and we have no risk, no corruption risk. So you don't need to make such an investment. You just need to make sure that you have a certain rules on gifts, a certain rules on how to deal with suppliers, third parties, and making sure, for instance, that when you hire another company, for instance, if you need to subcontract or hire another company, you make sure that this company is not involved in corruption. So the first thing is to make an analysis of your company, of your profile. What is your business? Where do you act? Where do you do business? The number of employees. How many companies are involved in your structure? Is it only one, or is it you have like 50 companies in the organizational chart? So the level of interaction with public administration. So all of this information are very important. So you can make a diagnosis of your risks, and based on the analysis of the risks, you're going to implement the integrity program, which is proportional and to your company risks. For instance, if you have a company that has a lot of participation in bids, a company that has to apply for public licenses, public authorizations and permissions very often, companies that are subject to public inspection. For instance, let's say you have a restaurant, you have a coffee shop. It's a small business, but you are subject to inspection by the health authorities. So even though sometimes it's a small restaurant, or it's a small business, it's a small number of employees, your company may be subject to inspection. So this is something that may be considered for a risk analysis. Hiring public agents or former public agents must be very, very, very risky sometimes. You gotta consider the rules for this, because it may be considered as an open door to corruption. Offering hospitality, gifts, and presents, setting unattainable goals or other forms of pressures to the employees. If the employee has to reach an unreachable goal, he or she may be, find other ways to get the deal. Hiring third parties may be also another risk area, because you don't know if these third parties, how they deal with corruption. They may be subject to an integrity program or not. They may have rules or not. So it's important to check when you hire a third party to make sure that they also are subject to a minimum level of integrity rules. Offering sponsorships and donations. It's very common that companies offer sponsorships and sponsorships, and sometimes donations. So this is also a risky area. You gotta have rules for this, because if you don't have rules for this, it's an open door to corruption. Mergers and acquisitions. If a company acquires another company, you gotta include in your due diligence, in your due diligence process, to make sure that this company that's been acquired, is clean. Does this company has an integrity program in place? So it's important to make sure that the acquisition is not buying another company's risks. So basically, the assessment of the risks must take into consideration mainly the likelihood of a perpetration of frauds and acts of corruption within public bidding process and procurement, and the impact of these wrongful acts on the company's activities. So when you implement an integrity program, you have to create policies. It's important that the company has policies and rules, so the employees, they know how to behave. Sometimes they have a doubt on how to proceed. So everything is really clear and very, very simply in a very concise way. For instance, some decisions must be subject to approvals levels. Some decisions must be subject to a hierarchy level. Rotation of employees, for instance. Sometimes you have the same employee or the same group of employees always in contact with the same public agents. So rotation may be one way of reducing the risk of corruption. Policies for offer of freebies and gifts in hospitality. Another very important area is the accounting procedures. Having strict accounting procedures. So this is now, we're talking about compliance, accounting compliance. But you see how integrity compliance must be coordinated with accounting compliance, because normally wrongful practice are usually disguised in the accounting records through legitimate payments such as commissions, consultancy fees, travel expenses, education grants, entertainment. So if you want to prevent corruption, you also have to have strict accounting records procedures, because then you can audit the compliance department together with the financial department. They may audit or by an external audit to make sure that there's nothing in the financial statements seem odd, or something that may be strange and something that should be investigated. And as I said before, third parties. Checking third parties before doing a contract, checking due diligence, and establishing contract clauses. We know that many companies, they have anti-corruption contract clauses today. This is one way of mitigating the risks of future problems if you have protection in the contract. So the fourth pillar of an integrity program is structuring of policies, rules, and guides. So in general, you will establish a code of ethics with the standards of ethics and conduct. So what should I do in terms of how should I act when I face certain situations? So the employees from the factory employee to the white collar employee to the managers, officers, and to the directors and the CEO, all of them must understand the rules. The rules must be simple, and they must be clear, and they must be really easy to understand. Basically, a code of conduct will contain the values and principles of the company, and the values and principles of the company must be transformed into rules and policies. And in general, the codes of conduct contain express prohibitions. And I'm not going to go into these prohibitions, but in general, the prohibitions are very clear to avoid any kinds of confusions. And this point of the reporting clarification whistleblowing channel. So if one person is aware of an issue, how to report and make sure you're not going to be retaliated. So this is really important. So in general, the whistleblowing channels are independent, are outsourced. So if I see something in my company, even if it's from the board of directors of something that come from superior in the company, I can report without fearing that I'm going to be retaliated and I'm going to be dismissed. So this is really important, that all the people in the company, inside the company and outside the company, third parties and employees, and all of them, they know how to report, and they are not afraid to report the frauds and the illicit, the frauds that they have been seeing. Training is also very important. So training must be periodic, once a year or every 6 months. All the collaborators must be trained, including the officers, and disciplinary measures. So if something happened, is the person going to be punished? Yes, and how? And the measures and the way the person will be punished must be really clear too, of course, to make sure that this is not just codes and books and paper, and the integrity policy is really applied. And the last point of the program is to continuous monitoring strategies. The program is an alive system. It's a system that must be fed by new roles every time, coming from when you have a new law, a new regulation. So the plan must be adapted, and the plan must be verified if the plan is being implemented, if it's working, if there are any deficiencies that must be solved. So the compliance department must work on a permanent monitoring of the system to make sure that corrections are done, assessing new risks. Sometimes the company starts to operate in another area, for instance, starts to operate in, I don't know, Australia. And so if we're going to set up a company in Australia. So, okay, so the compliance department must get to know Australian anti-corruption law. And then we have to adapt our program according to Australian law for Australian operations. Okay, so we have to, the compliance department must be very careful, because the system must be assessed every year, every 6 months, to make sure that nothing is missed in terms of new regulations, new areas, new markets, and all the actions must be documented, because if you need to prove in the future that you have, for instance, trained your employees, that you have applied the sanctions, and you have assessed the risks, so everything must be documented to make sure you have reports to present in case of you need to participate to a bid or to a public bid, or you're going to sign a contract with a public entity. So you have, your actions are all documented. You have reports on everything that you have developed in your integrity program. So that's it. I think I gave you all the information I wanted to give you today. My purpose was to talk to you for approximately half an hour. If you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So compliance is an investment. It's an investment. It's not an expense. But sometimes we think, but I need to spend money with this and that, and I don't want to spend money with this. But this is the type of investment that maybe save a lot of money in the future. So it must be seen as an investment, not as an expense. So I hope that I have been clear on the explanation about the integrity plan and how to cope with the new public law. And I'm gonna I'm gonna open now. The idea is to open now for questions. If someone wants to make a question or make some comments, this is time for comments and questions. So you can send the questions by the YouTube chat. So I'm gonna wait a little bit to see if there's any questions. I have a question here. So the question is to know if in order to do business with state companies, if it's necessary to have an integrity program in place. So, we have been discussing this a lot concerning Petrobras, because Petrobras has a system that in order to participate to bids with Petrobras, the supplier must have an integrity program in place. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand how the approval of the program is made, because you have, in the case of Petrobras, you have the integrity program receives a grade. So either the program is green or yellow or red. So if the company gets a red flag, it means that the company is not approved and is not able to provide and supply to Petrobras. So we had some cases in the past that we were really concerned about this situation, because we didn't have the information on how this grade was attributed. So we asked Petrobras and compliance department why the company had received the red flag. And basically what is required is exactly what I have discussed here today, that depending on the size of the company and the areas where the company does business and the markets, and if the company deals with the public sector or not. So all these aspects are considered by Petrobras in order to give to approve or not the integrity program. So depending on the size of the company and the areas and the risks and the level of interaction with the public sector, the company will receive a red flag or a green flag or a yellow flag. But in principle, if the company follows these 5 pillars that we have discussed today, in principle, the integrity program will be approved, and the company will be able to supply to Petrobras. This is what we have been seeing. So yes, it is mandatory to have the integrity program in place to supply to Petrobras. Even if it's a small business, it's required. So I hope I have answered the question. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'm gonna finalize the webinar. I'd like to thank you for your attention today, and we're gonna see you soon in the next webinar, always talking about the new procurement law and the new aspects brought by this law, which we consider are important for the companies that wish to do business with the public sector in Brazil. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.